Hi there. Welcome to today's episode of Stand Up. I've got Dr. Jason Johnson joining me, and that's it because last night I had a hangout and I'm ramping up for a very special live noon today, noon Eastern hour with Mara Quint and Christian Finnegan together live. I want you to tune into that on youtube.com/standupwithpete. Also, it should be broadcasting on Facebook and my Instagram pages, wherever you find me. I should be live with Christian and Mara today, going over the week's news, joking around, and having general fun. So tune in today at noon if you're listening on Friday. Otherwise, I'm going to throw right now to my conversation with Jason Johnson. No news, no good stuff. I'm going to get right to it. Let's check in and up with Jason Johnson, and then I'll catch up with you later at noon with more news and good stuff live today. Of course, Jason is a professor at Morgan State University, just down there in Baltimore. He's also a regular contributor and anchor, fill-in anchor over at MSNBC, where most people know him from. I met him years ago at CNN. We've been very good friends ever since. And you got to listen to his podcast, A Word with Dr. Jason Johnson on Slate. Very big announcement, big episode today. Go check that out. It's up and available. But right now, my conversation, which goes all over the place, with my friend Dr. Jason Johnson. You're live.
I am live.
You're on the internet with everybody watching us.
I am on the internet with everybody watching, and yet it's not OnlyFans. Who knew? Who knew there were so many options in this world?
I don't know any man who has an OnlyFans that makes money. Even a gay man. I don't know any.
I did not know this. I didn't know you knew that much about OnlyFans. I was kidding.
I know a good bit. I interviewed an OnlyFans content creator, a woman whose body defied anything you'd ever seen, like the shapeliness of her body, which probably creates some kind of preference, which creates a tremendous amount more demand. And she made millions of dollars. She was a lawyer, and then she made more a month than she was a year, just, going on OnlyFans.
That sounds like, it's interesting, given the world that you're in, the world that I'm in from time to time. Content creation is a lot of work. Like it really, really, really is, especially when especially when the content creation is you, right? Like if content creation is, and I don't want to, this word has negative connotations. You're not leeching, right? But if your content creation is fashion, well, someone else is creating the fashion. All you got to do is find it and talk about it, right? If your content creation is pop culture gossip, if your content creation is about sports, you're talking about content that other people make. But if your content creation is you, if people just like following your life, right? That's what you've sold them on. I'm an interesting person. That is exhausting because sometimes you ain't on. Well, having to be on all the time is work.
Being off is also interest to the viewers who follow you. You're talking about these two different kinds of content creation. I think it's all work. If the question is it work? It's a lot. You got to figure out all kinds of technology. There's a lot of super talented, brilliant, I know more than I should interview these people, like journeyman comedians, men and women, who are great on stage at entertaining people in live audiences, but they just aren't going to learn how to use an HDMI cable and connect it to their computer and then go live the way I'm trying to. Like I'm good enough. I'm right there on the hump. I'm figuring it out because I want to be able to make money and live wherever I want. This future economy, what do you think about the future of media? What are you going to do? What are you going to harness? What can you say publicly?
See, that's the thing. And this is a perfect lead in to what I called you about and left a message about and what I'm going to be talking about tomorrow. So I have been you're going to tell people the private news? You're going to go public? I'm not going to tell people the private news. I'm just going to tell them that they should listen to my podcast tomorrow. I have very, very important things that I'm going to share. And I will tell you this, that is the future. Right? If you look at content creation in any way for anybody in media, Mehdi Hassan, start ZTO. Mark Lamont Hill went to YouTube. Roland Martin started this years ago, right?
Call it independent. Call it the difference. The conversation I think you're getting to, and I love this, and obviously it's my life, is how do you go from corporate media, an on-air person, anchor, commentator, host, whatever, however you identify, contributor? How do you go from the corporate where you walk into the cable news studio as you have and continue to, as I have and continue to? How do you convert that into independent media, corporate to independent, let's call it, or internet media? And I just want to throw it back to you, but we've seen people get forced out, or in my case, not renewed, or in a lot of other people's cases, not renewed. And you've seen them sink or swim. And it all depends on, well, you know, can you actually make money doing this? What's the overhead? So go ahead. What do you think?
And what kind of money are you trying to make? Right. Like, so you and I have talked about this. You know, we met, at this point, almost 12 years ago doing CNN. Right. And I can reveal this now. CNN wasn't paying me. Right. When I was doing those morning segments, I think you were a paid contributor.
I was a paid. I had a contract then. Yeah. Yeah.
I was not a paid CNN contributor. And the thing is, I used to always tell people who were like, oh, my gosh, I want to do what you're doing. I was like, don't do this to make money, because they even 12 years ago, they weren't paying contributors that much. And I said, and the money can be very inconsistent. I said, now, if you want to do this to amplify your brand and monetize it in other ways, turn your TV appearances into speaking engagements and turn that into cash, well, there you go. But if you're going into this in and of itself to make money, it's extremely difficult to get rich off of TV.
But it does also give you and every other academic, which is your primary role and career, a lot more heat, swagger, and I would imagine the ability to negotiate. Like when I was at SIRIUS, I wasn't able to get any leverage to negotiate for more money until I got on CNN. And then I had a tremendous amount of leverage to get more money from SIRIUS because I was getting them attention. You're getting your college and other academics can get their universities noticed and mentioned. That's a good thing, right?
It's a necessary part of the job now. Yeah. So I was having this conversation with a very good friend of mine who I've had on my podcast a couple of times. You know, I think I can share this because he's talked about it. He talked about it to my class. I was talking to my friend Rodney Barnes. Now, he is a fantastic writer. He wrote on My Wife and Kids. He was one of I believe, the co-creators for Winning Time, the show about the Lakers. He's written for, you name the show, he's probably written for it at some particular point. I think Westworld, all sorts of other different places. And he now has, he just wrote a best-selling graphic novel, Blackula. Like he got the rights for sort of Blackula and did that, resurrected thing. But what we were talking about is that every single industry, and certainly the media industry, it goes through these shifts. Sometimes they're technological, sometimes they're taste-based, sometimes they're environmentally based. Every 15 or 20 years, if you're lucky to be doing it that long, and success is dependent on a willingness to change. And like you said, a good stand-up comedian, right, who does not want to learn how to take their content and put it on Instagram and put it on TikTok, you may not struggle, but you're going to be out on the road in a way that you may not want to do anymore when you're 47, right? If you don't learn how to TikTok your comedy.
I mean, you can make so much more money online in an hour than you would in a whole weekend or in a few hours of work. You can live
and you
wherever.
You don't have to fight anybody to get paid because YouTube's just going to pay you.
YouTube is paying people.
Yeah.
I know personally several people who are getting paid. They have showed me the checks, my friend. And so my advice to you and everybody, and this is why I'm doing this live now and everything is, I think people understand. I heard Scott Galloway, like him or not. I think he's great. I think he's a really smart analyst in a lot of ways. He's not always right. I don't always agree with him, but I certainly agree with him on this. Just think, if you're hosting a podcast, it has to be on YouTube. It has to be video. That no one finds you. I don't care how big you are, bigger than me, smaller than me. No one's finding, new people aren't finding your podcast because no one finds podcasts, but you find YouTube shit. They feed you YouTube all day long. Anything that you want. I mean, I wonder what they feed you, Jason, you filthy nerd. No, it's probably like cartoon shit and 80s theme shows and fucking football, sports. You're a lot of things.
And actually, if you can figure out the tech, which is something that is part of sort of my educational, I used to try and learn something over the holiday breaks. Roland Martin explained to me how you can sort of triple cast your stuff. So you can have something running on YouTube, running on Instagram, running on Twitter to the degree that anybody uses it anymore. Blue Sky doesn't have the technology yet, but you can run this across platforms. And I'll say this, which is another territory. So there's a great writer who I follow called Michael Jamin. Michael Jamin is great. You should follow him. He's on Instagram. He's really funny. He was one of the writers. He wrote Just Shoot Me. He was on, he wrote King of the Hill. I mean, he's written like every single sort of sitcom. And he has this new book out called A Paper Orchestra. And it's a series of essays about life, comedy, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so he has this great Instagram story he comes out with this week where he says, look, my book was just selected in Vulture as a top 4 comedy book of the year. And he said, let me read you all the rejection letters that I got about this book, A Paper Orchestra. And he started talking about the fact that he's like, a lot of the people who were rejecting him were saying, hey, you don't have enough of a social media presence for us to want to sell your book. Nobody knows who you are, right? And so he built up his social media audience by, during the writer's strike, teaching people more about writing. He just took a skill set like, hey, I'm an out-of-work writer. Let me tell you what to do.
Jason, it's crazy. I've been researching YouTube and how to monetize and what to do for the last few weeks, and I've learned so many hilarious things. Like if you made a video, I'm going to make a video. I'm going to just as an experiment to hook up an old stereo. I have this old stereo I can't let go of. Mm-hmm. It's got cool lights. Hook up an old stereo to an iPhone. Like that video, maybe it's 3 minutes. That video might throw off 10 grand a year or something for somebody.
Yes.
It's crazy because people, whatever you have to offer, whatever you're an expert on, great. But for me, it's talking to smart people like you. So I'm excited for whatever you're going to do. So take it away. What what else can you tell us about what your plan is, if anything, or was that it?
So I can tell everybody. So tomorrow we're dropping a very, 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 very special episode of my podcast, A Word with Jason Johnson. Super duper excited about. Can't tell you anything now, but I go on with this audience a lot. So the podcast tends to drop 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. So please make sure that you listen. Please make sure that you follow me on Instagram. Please make sure that you follow me on Blue Sky. My Instagram, which I always tell people, is Dr. Jason Politics, which is different than my Blue Sky or Twitter, which was, Dr. Jason.
Well, that's
Politics.
Your first damn problem. You got to have continuity in your screen name, but that's fine.
Look, it's a lesson learned.
Anybody's going to find you. Anybody's going to find you there. Yeah. And YouTube, you have to launch YouTube.
Yeah. So I have a YouTube channel. I'm going to actually be working on that over the next couple of weeks over the holiday break. I'm sitting in for Lawrence O'Donnell tomorrow night at 10 p.m. on Friday on MSNBC. I'll also be doing some post-holiday stuff, I think, on the 27th. Yeah, that's right, because Christmas is on a Wednesday, the 25th this year. And finishing up my graphic novel. Very excited about that. Doing a lot of work with it, making sure everything is set with that. In other news, I think I don't know if I mentioned this to you, Pete. I just got back from a week in Cuba, which is fascinating.
Why?
Absolutely fascinating.
I didn't know. You didn't tell me that.
Why did I come back? Well, I mean, I live here.
Why did you go to Cuba?
My university went. So Morgan State has a good relationship with the University of Havana. I can say for somebody who, look, I'm a political scientist, but my area of expertise is America. I know general stuff about Caribbean, South America, whatever. Spending time in Cuba, especially getting there now, because who knows what happens under a Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. But spending time in Cuba was absolutely fascinating. There are fewer examples of the power, I'm putting this nicely, of American sanctions and embargoes on a country than what you see happening there. Cuba is 30 miles from Miami. Cuba is closer to Miami than Orlando is to Miami. But the kinds of things that these people can't get access to because of the U.S. embargo, because they had the audacity to say that they didn't want to be basically a vassal state of America 60 years ago, it's shocking. It's jaw-dropping.
I thought they lifted a lot of that under Obama, then they put it back under Trump, and I just haven't followed it. But what else did you learn about their country, culture, history? Did you meet any cool people? Did you eat any cool things? Did you see any cool things?
Yeah. So I met a lot of great people. Like I said, it was a university trip. Key thing, in case anybody in the government's listening, you can't go to Cuba as a tourist. You either have to go there for training or you're going there as a scholar. So I was there as a scholar.
Ridiculous.
One of the things that you learn, so, one of the things famous things you see about Cuba all the time are like, they'll have these beautiful classic cars, right? From the 50s and 60s, you'll see the cars. People take pictures in front of them. And I had assumed that they were shells. I was like, okay, over the last 50 or 60 years, they've probably been, playing with the engines, upgrading them, but you keep this old-fashioned shell. No. Those are the original cars from the 50s and the 60s. It is so difficult to get updated equipment into Cuba because of the U.S. embargo that these folks are still working with cars from 60 years ago.
Well, my other understanding was the only reason those cars can still exist is because the climate doesn't rust them. If they were in Michigan, you couldn't keep a car outside. It would be dead.
You can barely keep blue jeans in Michigan. I mean, look, you ever want to know somebody who comes from the Midwest? The bottom of their jeans are always frayed like it's been smoking lines of cocaine because of the salt.
Oh, God. I know that, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody point it out.
We're black all the time. It's the only way to keep your pants from looking terrible. So, yes, the weather helps. The weather does help. I had a gentleman there tell me, he said, the biggest thing, it's not sneaking in blue jeans like in, Russia and the Soviet Union 30 something years ago. He's like, if you bring spark plugs, like that's a huge thing there because it's something people have difficulty getting access to. So I'll say this about, say, food, right? The food is all over the place. There are some places I went where the food was incredibly bland and uninteresting. Why? Because it's very, very difficult to get fresh produce.
Right.
Why is it difficult to get fresh produce? Because part of the U.S. embargo, and like I said, I compared this to like an angry ex-husband who wants to punish his wife forever because she had the nerve to say that she wanted to leave him. It's not just that the United States won't sell things to Cuba. It's that the United States has passed laws telling other countries, if your ship docks in Cuba to sell products, that same ship cannot come to America for anywhere from 4 to 6 months. So if I'm delivering stuff and I'm like, well, wait a minute, Cuba's here, America's only 30 miles away. I can't afford to have this ship not be able to come back to the U.S. coast for half a year. So sorry, Cuba, we're not bringing you anything. So getting green vegetables, getting spinach, getting broccoli, getting different things like that can be very, very challenging there. So if you want really good food, you usually have to go into Old Havana where they have some incredible things that they sort of make locally and domestically because everything else is a challenge.
We're now live on Instagram. Welcome, Instagrammers. I'm just testing out all of this software and these apps because, as you said earlier, this is what you got to do. You got to go live on all the different apps and platforms that you're at. Welcome back from Cuba. It's really interesting to know. I hope that you smuggled something back, but since we're live, we probably shouldn't admit to anything.
Not a thing. I'm not trying to risk it. I'm not even just saying that for the streamer. People are like, hey, you want to bring back some cigars? So I was like, no. One, I don't smoke. Two, I don't want to go to prison.
How much I'm sure you're going to be anchoring on MSNBC a lot or contributing a lot during next couple weeks when, people take time off. I feel like you're on a lot. You step up. You're always on. But how much when you're anchoring, how much of it do you get to bring to, you kind of obvious what the big stories are. But like right now, we've got Luigi Mangione and the healthcare murder, which is on day, however, of a lot of coverage. And, of course, Trump transition. I feel like there's almost nothing else that's getting attention. Syria should. The Middle East always can. The craziness in South Korea. How much of, do you get to say, hey, I'd really like to talk about this and talk to these people when you're anchoring, and how much of it is like done by the production team?
I can only speak for myself. I think it has to do with the show, the time of week, and what's on the agenda, right? Like, I don't think I've ever sat in for anybody who has said, like, no, we can't do that just because editorial, right? One, because I think I know what the general parameters are. And two, I've never had anybody sort of say that. But at the same time, the whole news industry, I'll just be honest, is in a really interesting place, right? Like, You've had 4 years of coverage of one particular person when he wasn't in office. Now this person is back in office. Audiences across the board have said we're tired of him. And so there is a real interest in covering the vast, interesting diversity that is America and covering things that don't necessarily immediately have to do with politics. So I'm optimistic. Like I think, especially over the holiday season, I have a couple stories that I'm pitching for tomorrow that are, we when we hear local news, right, we think of Parks and Rec. We think of community meetings, like when you were running for, helping with a school board, everything else like that. But there's stories like that happening around the country that are really interesting.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those should be covered, but it's a matter of can you get eyeballs on them? Can you get enough people watching and caring? It's always been the hard thing to do so that you can sell advertisements, so that you can profit. Because if you go independent, you start doing your own thing, whether you're, Mehdi Hassan or me, you got to find a way to make money, and everybody has a different path and a different ability to create that demand. But could you, I don't know how you or anybody could go on CNN or MSNBC tonight and make me, or would be easy for me, other people care to listen to you talk about gentrification. You just did a great episode about that on your podcast. You can do that on a podcast. You do it great, but make me care about this really important issue tonight at 8 on cable news. It's never going to really.
I think we have, in a positive way, I think we have examples of that. Right. And they don't pop up all the time, and they don't always have to be a tragedy. It doesn't have to be, a healthcare CEO getting killed and, somebody being arrested for it. Think of Flint. Flint, that was a local story. And as we've seen in subsequent years, the idea that you have bad water is not unique to Flint. You had stuff in Alabama. You had stuff in Kentucky. You have stuff all over the country. That was a local
but
story.
I'm here for the D block pollution in America segment every night. I'm watching it. Let's go. Pollution. Flint was a story of, polluted water and how it was man-made and caused and not prevented. But you could do that all over America every night in the D block. I just don't think it gets the kind of ratings that right now all anybody's talking about is his kid. It's crazy.
It's crazy, but it's predictable. It happens, right? It was like last summer when people were talking about, Johnny Depp and his trial. I don't.
It's care. Different. I'll say it's different because everybody's talking about healthcare and health policy, and people are now having serious conversations. So I'm glad for that. I wish it didn't take this, but it's all everybody's talking about. One angle of it.
I'll give you a quick example of this, and it's interesting because I literally was talking to an exec yesterday, and we were talking about the sort of dearth of nuanced conversations that we sometimes have in public discourse. So when I'm in Cuba, I asked our guide, hey, how's Elian Gonzalez doing? Right now, for anybody under the age of 35, that's some Trivial Pursuit stuff. And that's also an old reference, right? That's a Jeopardy question, right? Who the heck is Elian Gonzalez? But if you're like me and you're in your 40s, you remember that. So we're talking about Elian Gonzalez. His life has been really fascinating.
I think it's Elian. Quit saying Elian.
Is it Elian?
I don't know. You always pronounce weird words weirdly.
I get away with it. I just keep talking.
You do. You do.
But the thing is, so, he's like 29 now. He's married. He's an engineer. He's like married and got kids, right? He lives a pretty regular life, right? And the interesting thing is, so I'm having this conversation with one of my colleagues who's a very, very progressive left person and a student who's about 25, 26. Student, of course, she has no idea who Elian Gonzalez is. She's like, I've never heard of this story, right? So my colleague is sitting there saying, yes, and it was this terrible thing, and imperialist America was trying to take this child, but his father was in Cuba, and Cuba was victorious and brought him back, all this sort of stuff. And I was letting my colleague talk. I was like, okay. And I'm talking to the student later. I was like, yeah, it wasn't like that. I said, this was actually a really complicated story. The majority of America did not feel that he should go home. You had a real split. And I said, and it transcended party and race and culture.
It was a human story.
You had some people who are like, for those who don't remember, the short story is this kid, his parents were in Cuba. The mother wanted to flee Cuba to the United States. The father did not. The mother decided, I'm going to go anyway. So she flees Cuba with Elian and a couple of people. Their raft collapses, falls apart in the ocean. Everybody dies. Elian survived for 2 days in the water, surrounded by sharks. He was found by the United States, brought in by the Coast Guard, was connected with some of his family in Miami. The Miami Cuban community was like, we don't want to send this kid back, blah, 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 blah. His father's like, bring him back home. And I said, and across America, you had some people who are like, his life is going to be better in America than Cuba. Don't send him back to the communist country. You had other people who were saying, hey, that's his dad. He should be reunited with his dad. And you had other people who were saying his mother literally gave her life to try to bring this boy to American freedom. If we send him back, we're dishonoring her death. All of that ignored the fact that this was traumatic. And you ended up with pre-internet, one of the most memed photos of all time, which is American troops holding a gun on this boy and his uncle in a closet.
That's right.
Because we decided to take him back, give him to Cuba, which is one of the reasons why Al Gore had difficulty and lost Florida in the 2020 election, 2000 election.
But you're comparing that story to this story with America's obsession and divide over, but that was kind of an immigration policy. By the way, I was thinking as you were explaining, imagine if that happened today, Trump would like go out and kick his inner tube back. We're like, sorry, Elian, gotta go.
Well, not only that, but my whole point of mentioning it is,
or he'd throw him some paper.
Nuanced conversation, right? Like we're having nuanced conversations now about healthcare. Is it going to last? Probably not past this weekend,
right?
But it can happen, even if it takes a tragic thing for people to pay attention.
All right. I'll let you go. I know we said like 20 minutes. I appreciate you very much. What is that T-shirt? Been wondering.
Oh, it's Santa Claus.
Oh, shit. Got it. That's hilarious.
Big Santa thing.
I wish I saw that the whole thing. We should have framed it up better. Thank you very much for stopping in, man. I really appreciate you. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing your announcement tomorrow on A Word, the podcast. Go listen to it. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, I'll hit you up this weekend, man. Yep. Thanks so much, Pete.
Punch out because I'm going to stay here live with people and talk all alone.
All right, leave studio. Bye.
Leave studio. There he goes, everybody. All right, how did that work? I think it worked okay. I'm figuring it out this week, trying some new things, and I appreciate you supporting me and bearing with me, working hard on new features. You got to do video if you want to survive in this game, so I'm doing it. No excuses. Let's go. Let's go. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you to everybody who joined me at the Hangout last night. Join us at noon if you're listening on Friday the 13th. Before noon East, I'll be live with Mara Quinn and Christian Finnegan together. It should be real fun today at noon and youtube.com/standupwithpete. Hope to see you there. Have a great weekend. John Carroll taking us out now.
Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense and you stand up. Stand up. Point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up. Stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up. Stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for loss, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let it's a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom never go unspent. You can see them flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside. And listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand